Hey y'all, welcome back. This one was much darker than I had anticipated, especially the childhood portion. So today, obviously you can tell by the thumbnail, we're talking about Maurice Sendak. So I've been wanting to do Maurice for a while now, just because I especially have a very, very fond place in my heart when it comes to Little Bear and the illustrations that he did for Little Bear. And I just absolutely love that book. I really love that show as a kid. I've shown that show to my kids. So Maurice is always on my list, towards the top of my list of who I was wanting to do for a deep dive. First things first though. I haven't had this flavor in forever. Let's see. Okay, that's much better than I remember it. So of course, first things first, please like and subscribe. It appeases the algorithm gods, and I would love to have you stick around. We have a lot of fun here. Okay, so Maurice was born on June 10th in 1928 in Brooklyn, New York, and he was born to parents Sadie and Philip. Now, when I was doing research into this, it started right off the bat. It started off with the parents, because I could tell by doing the research into this that Maurice's childhood really affected him. It really, really affected his whole life. It affected the outlook he had on the world, on his illustrations, just really everything. And so I knew that I had to really dive into his childhood on this one especially. I always like looking into their childhood, but you know what I mean? This one just had extra emphasis. And so starting off with the parents, so his parents were Polish, Jewish immigrants. They had immigrated to the US, and Sadie was actually sent here when she was only 16, which I thought was kind of wild. It's definitely a different time, isn't it? So Sadie was actually sent here because her own mother, quote, couldn't handle her anymore. And I guess Sadie was just a huge flirt, and she'd just been kind of flirting her way around the village, back in Poland, and including Philip, which was Maurice's father. So, and Philip was kind of said to be this really just well-respected man at the time and very handsome. And so when she was sent to the US, Philip actually followed her over here. But I guess when he got here, he just became, they said a drudge. He just kind of lost all the life in him, and he just was meh. Now, right off the bat, so Maurice is said to have had a really good relationship with his siblings, and he even referred to them as his chosen parents. And he just really had a hard time with his own parents. He felt like they just couldn't understand the complexities of childhood. It's almost like they forgot what it was like to be a child. Maurice said that his mom, he felt didn't even like children. And then as time later went on, where Maurice kind of started getting this knack for artistry, and he wanted to have these aspirations when it came to art. His father, he said, just couldn't understand it. He couldn't see it. He wasn't supportive of it. And so this created just a huge strain within their own relationship. There are very brief moments of reconciliation between Maurice and his parents, but we'll get to that later. We'll get to that later down the line. Now, Maurice's life was just filled with turmoil, and unfortunately, the family was not immune to any trials or really dark times, which, I mean, nobody is, but sometimes you just read up on people and you're like, wow, you guys really got slapped with a lot. This unfortunately happened too, especially on Maurice's bar mitzvah day. So on the day that he's supposed to have his bar mitzvah, his mom comes in and tells him that Papa can't come. So his dad can't come. And he goes in, and his dad was lying in his bed, and Maurice flipped out. He screamed at his dad. He basically told him how dare you not come to my bar mitzvah? You need to come. It's my bar mitzvah. And so begrudgingly, his dad got up, went to the bar mitzvah. Well, little did Maurice know that his father actually had just found out through the Jewish club that he was a part of that his whole family had just been killed in the Holocaust. And not only that, it was both parents' families. So all the family that was still over in Poland were unfortunately involved in the Holocaust, and they did pass away in the Holocaust. And so Maurice said he realized during the bar mitzvah, he could see the look on his dad's face, and he said that he felt so bad. He knew that he had done something very wrong, and he felt just really bad that he had made him suffer more than he had to. And so that was something that just really weighed on him. Now, Maurice also himself suffered a lot with sicknesses as a kid. I mean, he was sick a lot. And honestly, I think this kind of peeks its way through in some of his books later. But obviously, I mean, we'll get to that part. I'm trying to stay like all linear here. It's very hard for me. So there was times where he had like the measles, he had scarlet fever, he had pneumonia. So basically his parents, he said this later on, his parents were basically just kind of expecting him to die at any point. Like they were pretty much just like, oh, this is it. This is the time. But I mean, he managed to keep healing through it. But he said that he spent a lot of time in his bed as a kid, but it was ultimately this that really inspired him to pursue art. So because of the sicknesses and he was stuck in his room and everything, he had a window in his room. And so basically his views of the outside world were kind of influenced mainly by either what he could see through his window or the people who would come and visit him, which was typically like family. Also, the year that he was born, Mickey Mouse was created and he like loved Mickey Mouse. So he loved Mickey Mouse, but then he also like really turned to books during this time because he was just like trapped inside in his bed all day long. Now, when he was 12, his family actually went to go see Disney's Fantasia, and which, I'll be honest, this one's not really my favorite, but I've seen it. Like, I've seen it, checked it off the bucket list. It's not my favorite. But they did go see this movie, and it was really this movie that really inspired him to want to become, like, an illustrator. He wanted to pursue art. And this was, like, what really did it in for him. He just loved the whole idea of like this like make-believe world with these invented characters, and really like there was no boundaries on like your imagination. He just loved that whole concept. Now, like I said before, his father did not understand the illustration or like the artistic aspirations. Okay. His dad did not understand it. And it was ultimately a cousin of his that really pushed him to do it. Now, the thing was, they weren't supposed to have contact with this cousin because she was actually a communist. So I can see where that would throw like a wrench in the mix, especially for the parents, you know what I mean? Considering everything, you know what I'm saying? So he wasn't supposed to have contact with them, but him and his sister would actually sneak out and go visit this cousin. And it was this cousin who saw the potential in his art and really pushed him to go and do it. Now, Maurice hated school, which I'm finding this to be quite the common thread when it comes to creative people, like creative souls. I had a really hard time in school. I didn't do well like in the school setting. It just was not the way my brain functioned. We also just barely talked about this whole thing too with Kay Thompson. Kay Thompson didn't have a very easy time in school. And I feel like this has happened a lot of times with a lot of the people that I've already been doing deep dives in. Like they just don't do well in the school setting. So it makes me feel a lot better that wasn't just me. But while he was in school, he did continue to draw. And then his parents were wanting him to go to like traditional college. And he didn't want to do that, which I don't blame him, you know, like why go there if it's not even going to work for you. Actually, after he graduated in 1948, he then started a job at FAO Schwarz. And it said that he was working as like a window dresser for FAO Schwarz. And so while he was doing this job, he was actually taking classes at the New York, oh my gosh, what is with me? I'm like saying these words today. At the New York Art Students League. So he was using his, like the wages that he was making from FAO. I quit. So he was using his funds from the FAO Schwarz job to pay for the school. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get through this video. But then towards the end of his schooling, he then did get some illustration jobs. And so once he got enough work to be like a full-time illustrator, that's when he finally quit his FAO Schwarz job. And then the first book that he actually wrote and illustrated himself was called Kenny's Window, and that was in 1956. Now at the time, this is when illustrators really thought that, you know, illustrations were mainly there just to clarify a lot of information, and they should just be very kind of clear cut. A lot of the times they were very just like bright and kind of happy illustrations. Well, if you've ever looked through Maurice's illustrations, you can see that he kind of does almost the opposite. His are more like moody and dark, and they tend to add a lot of mystery to the books. And this is really seen in his book in 1963, and arguably one of his most famous books, Where the Wild Things Are. At this point in his career, he did have a substantial following, okay? It wasn't like he didn't have any following up until this point. He did have a good following, but it was really this book that just like launched his career. But some interesting kind of behind the scenes on this book is a lot of parents were initially really worried about this book because of the idea of the monsters And it was almost kind of hard to sell the parents on it at first, but it quickly grew in popularity and people just loved it. And you can really see in this book how kind of moody and a little bit darker the illustrations are. Also the characters. He managed to kind of get this really cool mix of like grotesque monsters, but that are still like approachable and not too scary for kids. So it's a very cool mixture that he was kind of able to hit. And this is also what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about him being stuck in his room all the time as a kid. I think part of this book also comes from his own experience as a child. Now, I couldn't find this anywhere. There's multiple layers to this book, and we'll kind of get to all of them in just a second. But I do think that him being stuck in his bed, I mean, he had to use his imagination as a child, and it kind of just forced him to do that. That's kind of what Max does in this book. He's sent to his room, he's sent to his room without any dinner, and he uses his imagination to dream up this whole other world. And there's a bed and there's a window in there. I mean, like, I know like any bedroom, but you know what I mean. But to me, I took that as it was almost like his experience as a child. But also in this book, something that Maurice was really passionate about was he was wanting to show like the realities of childhood, which includes kids maybe not always acting 100% perfect, because kids are not 100% perfect. And that's something that he especially talked about with this book, was that Max acts like a normal child. He misbehaves, he gets sent to his room, but in the end, his mom has his supper waiting for him, and it's nice and hot because she still loves him. That's very much like the parent-child relationship. I mean, and Maurice himself even said, this is going to be a quote, "In plain terms, a child is a complicated creature who can drive you crazy." Okay, understatement. There is a cruelty to childhood, and there is an anger. And I did not want to reduce Max to the trite image of the good little boy that you find in too many books. He is very much about being realistic to kids. Oh man, I needed that. And then he actually won the Caldecott Medal for this book. This is considered the highest honor for a picture book in the US. And then in 1970, this is actually when he wrote the book In the Night Kitchen. And then in this book, he actually kind of just shoved everything he loved into this book, which was like movies and like Mickey Mouse and New York. And so he said it was kind of just like a hodgepodge of like a whole bunch of different stuff that he just like really enjoyed. But this book did also come with controversy. So this book actually caused a lot of issues because there's some images in the book that depict a young undressed boy kind of throughout the book. And now I've never seen the book, so I don't know to what extent this is. I don't know if it's like the back. I don't know if it's the front. I don't know. I've never seen it. I've never seen the book, so I don't really know. Okay. It appears on the American Library Association most banned books, like the most controversial list. And then on the 100 most frequently challenged books from 1990 to 1999, this book was ranked 21. So if you have seen this book, I'm curious to know if you guys agree, because I saw like the cover. The cover is so his illustration style, but I've never seen the book. I've never like read the book. I didn't even know about it. I didn't even know the controversy behind it. So I was very interested. So let me know what you think. So now we're jumping up to 1981, where he writes a book called Outside Over There. Now, this book is very interesting for many different reasons, because it kind of showcases a sister. Her name was Ida, where she kind of had some sibling issues with her younger sister in the book. Apparently there's like some sibling jealousy, and she doesn't want to have to be responsible for her little sister. But while the dad goes away, she is responsible for her little sister. Well, her sister gets taken away in the middle of the night by some goblins. And so her sister must go and rescue her. So in the end, she does end up defeating the goblins, and they go on this like magical adventure, and she saves her sister. And in the book, there is apparently a picture of a ladder kind of coming out of one of the top story windows. And this is said to have been kind of a hint back to a very, very popular true crime case that did happen when Maurice was very little. And it apparently like haunted him. Like it's a case that just kind of stayed with him. Now I'm very much into true crime. And this is like the case for me, I think, where like I watch a lot of true crime stuff, but every once in a while there's a case that comes along that just haunts you to a different degree. Not saying that the other cases are not just as evil or as dark or as just tragic, but there's just something about certain cases that just gut wrench you. Like, oh my gosh. And there's ones that I just can't get out of my mind. And I think this is what happened for Maurice. So the case that this is supposedly referring to is the Lindbergh kidnapping. So this happened back on March 1st in 1932. So Maurice wasn't even very old at this time, but so I can see why this would like really haunt him as a child. So in this case, young Charles, he was only 20 months old at the time, and he was in his room upstairs where he was actually kidnapped from his crib in the middle of the night. Both of his parents were killed as well. And then unfortunately later, a truck driver found Charles's body on the side of the road. All the media stations that were reporting this case called it like the crime of the century, because it was just incredible that this even happened. It happened up in New Jersey. People were just very, very taken back by this case. This case even spurred like the US Congress to create a whole law around kidnapping. It's called the Federal Kidnapping Act, or they also call it the Little Lindbergh Law, which makes it a federal offense to kidnap someone and take him across state lines. So something else very interesting about Maurice is that he actually loves classical music, especially Mozart. Mozart was like his favorite composer. So something that he also did as well, which I had no idea about, he also did like production and like set design and costume design for some like musicals. So one was for Mozart's The Magic Flute. Another one was for a musical called Love of Three Oranges. I don't even know what that musical is about. I have no idea. I've never even heard of it. But then he also did like The Nutcracker. Now, something that I thought was very interesting was Maurice actually specifically said that he hated the term children's book illustrator, which I kind of did a double take. I was like, what? But honestly, I can see what he's saying, because I do feel like this in a sense when it comes to my books and like calling myself a children's book illustrator. He just felt like it really belittled his talent, like as an illustrator, just because, it was specifically mainly in children's books. Like people in a sense think that you're not as good or not as talented simply because you're not doing crazy like art pieces or works or working on a big canvas or things like that. And he did go on to say this quote, "I have to accept my role. I will never kill myself like Vincent van Gogh, nor will I paint beautiful water lilies like Monet. I can't do that. I'm in the idiot role of being a kiddie book person." So like I said, I kind of get this to a degree. I feel like sometimes people don't take me as seriously, like when I say I'm a children's book illustrator versus just like an illustrator or like an artist. I feel like when you say those terms, I feel like they come with a lot of like esteem. And I feel like almost with children's book illustrators, you almost have to like prove yourself a little bit more. Now, maybe that's not the case. Maybe I'm just up in the night. Maybe, it's just all in my head. I don't know. But that's just the way it feels. You know what I mean? Now, do you remember how I said before that Maurice's childhood like really messed him up? Like how we talked about that? He was so afraid of messing up another child, like inflicting his own experience on someone else, that he never had children of his own. He was actually afraid he was going to like traumatize a child. Like he actually says that he was afraid like he would mess it up, which I think is true of any parent. I think if any, well, hold on. Well, time out. I think if any sane, healthy adult who has children, there is a healthy level of like fear that you're going to somehow mess your kids up, which to some degree, no matter what you do, something you do is going to cause an issue somewhere down the line. So it's like you literally just try your best. You try your best. You try to work with your kids as best as you can. You try to figure out each other's personalities as best you can. But something's gonna happen. But it's also his brother who felt the exact same way. They said that they just felt like so dysfunctional after the childhood that they had. They just did not feel in the right headspace to have their own kids. And then of course, kind of having the hindsight of being an adult and growing up and then being able to look back on your own parents, they did reflect back like on their own childhood and on their parents. And they said like, our parents should have been crazy, and they were crazy for everything that they went through. But then they felt bad for how they treated their parents, like especially their mom. While Maurice's brother was lying on his deathbed, he reflects back on this. He just says like how bad he felt with the way he treated his mom. And Maurice just tells him, like we were kids, like we didn't understand at the time what was really going on. We didn't understand the whole scope of it. And, and hindsight is always 20/20. Now, here is where Maurice gets his very brief reconciliation with his parents. This happens like a few times in his life. And He actually ended up illustrating some children's books for Isaac Singer. Now, these books actually went on later to win a Nobel Prize. And so this is a point where his parents were very proud of him. And so it kind of gave him this very brief moment of feeling that pride from his parents. And so later there was another instance too where Maurice actually went through some of the family albums and found some of his father's like brothers. And then he also went to his mom's side and found some of like her family members as well and made illustrations of them. And this of course made the family very, very emotional because these were the family members who had suffered in the Holocaust. So it was a very emotional experience for the family. They cried. And it was one of those very brief moments for Maurice too where he felt really close to his parents. So later when Maurice was kind of reflecting on his life, he did say that he was crazy. And he said, I don't say that to be like a smart A, but I genuinely feel like I'm like somewhat crazy. But he also said that's like what makes his work really, really good. And he also says like, not everybody's going to like my work, and that's totally fine. He also said this, quote, I don't do it for everybody or anybody. I do it because I can't not do it. And I felt that. Like, I know for me, like in my books, not everyone's going to like the taste of my books. Not everyone is going to like the classic feeling of the books. They're not going to like my illustrations, and that's totally fine. But I have gone a long time in my life not being able to create after being able to create for a long time. I had this whole break in my life, like a decade. And it was being able to create again made it all worth it. So I know that there's people out there who really like my illustration style, and then there's other people who don't, and that's totally fine. And that's the beauty of art, is it comes down to personal taste. Now, throughout his life, he actually had a long-term relationship with Eugene, who I believe was a psychoanalyst. I think that's what it was. But their relationship was like a 50-year-long relationship. And he actually never kind of came out to his parents about the whole thing. So Maurice said that he kind of knew that his dad knew about Eugene and like kind of their relationship. But he said that his mom was kind of, in the nicest way, he said that she was basically just kind of oblivious. Like she probably had no idea what was going on. Now, when Eugene actually passed away, this is when Maurice started having some heart trouble. What is wrong with me today? I cannot get a freaking word out. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so tired. I'm like so sleep deprived. And when Eugene died, this is when Maurice actually started to have some heart problems. He said that he pretty much just like caved in with sadness, which that broke my heart. To lose someone that you were so close with for so long, that like absolutely breaks my heart. Oh, it's so sad. And he also kind of reflects too, like on losing his friends, like, you know, as they're getting older and his other friends are passing away as well. He just said that it just accommodates us older people to the inevitability of it all. So that's kind of a weird thought. And he just felt so sad. He felt so sad and so lonely. And it's just, it really honestly kind of paints a better picture as to his attitude towards the end. I had read this one article. It was towards the end of his life. His attitude, he's very kind of just brash, and he seems to have just like not a very good outlook towards a lot of people. But honestly, it kind of makes sense. I think he was just really hurting, and he was just really lonely. I mean, I think people like from the outside, they probably saw him as just some like old mean guy at that point. But really, I think he was just lonely. He was just hurt, and he just had no one else. Some comments that I thought were very interesting that he had made about some other people was he actually spoke on Roald Dahl, which we've done a video on. That was a very interesting guy, as a lot of these people are. Very colorful characters. So he said this, he said, quote, cruelty of his books is off-putting. I would kind of have to agree. Scary guy. I know he's very popular, but what's nice about this guy? He's dead. That's what's nice about him. Wow. When asked about Stephen King, he said, BS. Like, the whole thing, you know what I mean? We're on YouTube. And then for some reason, he was asked about Gwyneth Paltrow, and he said, I can't stand her, and I would have to agree. I always think I time this really well. Somehow I always either finish too early or I'm like behind. Let me finish this all up and then we'll reconvene. So now that we're back, one of the things that I really loved was reading that one of the last things that he said, some of his very final words were, somehow I'm finding out as I'm aging, I'm in love with the world. And there we have it. That's the story of Maurice Sendak. So a lot darker, like childhood and stuff that I imagined, but it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Like looking on his illustrations and things like that, it all makes sense. And you can really see how different life experiences can really influence like your art style. And that I can even say for myself, like it was my experience with like the classics as a kid that really influenced my style now as a children's book illustrator. So it's kind of crazy how that stuff works out. So please make sure to subscribe. I'd love to have you stick around, and definitely like the video. It appeases the algorithm gods, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.